The girl was tied to the table in bare clothes and was humiliated by three men. There was a man next to her, staring at her coldly. No matter how painful she was, the men were merciless, and even aroused the second-generation rich people's greater interest. It seems that only in this way can they satisfy their beastish desires. After injecting the girl with anesthetic, it was the turn of the man next to her. What is different from those second-generation rich people is that he looks like a gentleman, but his methods are very cruel. He slowly walked up to the girl and then touched her soft face. He was merciless and wrapped the fishing line around the girl's neck. The girl struggled, but the man kept intensifying the force until a blood spurt came out and hit the man's face. At this moment, he showed a satisfied smile. The man is the famous local prince, Jin Gwangri. This is already the 30th girl they killed. Long before that, the girl's family was brutally killed by them. The brutality of the scene made even the police officer Jin feel unbearable. In order to avenge the girl's family, Jin finally confirmed after a long investigation that the girl was killed by the Jin Gwangri gang. When he held the evidence and found the police chief here, he wanted him to hand over the criminal to the law. But the police chief loved the forces behind Jin Gwangri and didn't want to meddle in his business. Instead, he wanted to transfer Jin to the countryside. Angry Jin threw down the evidence and resigned with a gun. What surprised him was that 3 years later, the brutal murder of the Jin Gwangri gang was still not over. On the barren land outside the city that day, he found a body of a naked woman. From the way she died, it can be seen that this must be Jin Gwangri's operation. Not only that, for the past 3 years, as long as it is a police officer who is responsible for investigating serial murder cases, he will commit suicide for no reason. The cause of death is also extremely strange. Watching the continuous murder cases on TV, the police station also felt a lot of public pressure. But obviously, the people in the police force don't want to be the next target of Jin Gwangri. In the end, the leader had to call Kai Yidao back and let him take over the investigation mission. Kai Yidao naturally knew what the leader was thinking. Although he knew that the investigation would be life-threatening, he still chose to take over the mission. On the first day of his return to the police force, he came to the forensic lab and found an eggplant on the body of a victim. There was even a suspect's fingernail on it. Kai Yidao wanted to extract the DNA of several princes immediately and do a related comparison, but he was stopped by his subordinates. He didn't want Kai Yidao to be the target of the prince. Who knew that Kai Yidao would express in public that he would arrest them at all costs and told everyone not to worry about him? Everyone couldn't say anything else and had to hold the arrest warrant to go on the way to arrest the prince. At the same time, the procurator also learned about this. He naturally knew that he could not offend the prince anyway. In addition, the superiors emphasized many times the importance of the current political situation, so he rushed over. As a result, when he arrived there, he found that many people had gathered at the door. The procurator realized that things were getting worse, but he had to protect the prince. He wanted to take Jin Gwangri away in the name of national search. He let him go after interrogation for 2 days. Who knew that Kai Yidao would kill him on the way? Kai Yidao naturally knew that the procurator would do this, so he didn't give the procurator the face. Instead, he held the arrest warrant that the procurator could not refuse. This is the warrant. Arrest warrant. The warrant issued directly by the Honorable Judge Guan. Do you have the warrant? Number he arrested Jin Gwangri directly and watched the procurator leave. But he also knew that he could not give up Jin Gwangri, so he found a lawyer for Jin Gwangri in advance. Let him stay silent in the police station. Then he sent his subordinates to find Jin Gwangri's gang. Kai Yidao questioned Jin Gwangri in the police station why there was his DNA on the victim's body, but the lawyer defended him. Jin Gwangri was hit by a dish. Every day, he would give the neighbors around him some eggplant. Jin Gwangri seemed to give a perfunctory answer. In fact, he gave the police a step. As usual, they would let him go in the name of the prince. Who knew that Kai Yidao standing in front of him was someone who wanted to send him to prison? So he didn't give Jin Gwangri the face at all. I said your DNA came out. I didn't say it came out of the eggplant. How did you know it was an eggplant? How did you memorize the picture? Jin Gwangri just smiled slightly. But the smile behind him indicated that his counterattack was about to begin. As expected, with an inexplicable waiter, he entered the police station. Everyone was just looking for their food. They didn't notice at all that the procurator connected the surveillance footage in the police station. He watched the police team's every move to find a way to respond at any time. On the other hand, a large number of surveillance footage was also found in the police station. And under the endless efforts of everyone, they found the footage of Jin Gwangri being monitored. This is enough to overthrow his so-called non-existent evidence. Kai Yidao was overjoyed. He took the evidence and went to Jin Gwangri. Go on vacation? Alibi. Are you Hong Gil-dong? Do you use a clone? Who knew that Jin Gwangri was still just a witness? Only because he knew that his scapegoat was about to appear. As expected, just as he thought. Not long after, the scapegoat was sent to the police station, and he was also forced by the procurator to bear all the crimes alone. Looking at this scene, I'm sure all the actors know that all this is just Jin Gwangri's conspiracy and layout. But the police chief was afraid of the whole world. He could only treat the scapegoat as the real murderer. At night, Kai Yidao returned home with a face of resentment. Who knew that as soon as he came in, there was a trace of someone in the room? Out of caution, Kai Yidao stood up and walked over the baseball bat. As a result, he was found in the corner of the sofa, sitting with a man. It was the former police officer who was forced to resign. Because he was in charge of investigating Jin Guangri's case, he was not only chased by the other party all the way, but also the people under him. He was the only one who survived. Lao Jin told Kai Yidao that Jin Guangri was in South Korea, but he not only had the protection of his father, but also the protection of the Americans. Then he took out the photos of those victims being tortured to death. Seeing this, Kai Yidao was completely enraged. He rushed straight to Jin Guangri and wanted to teach him a lesson. But he was stopped by everyone. Jin Guangri laughed. He knew that Kai Yidao at this time was not his opponent at all, so he told Kai Yidao very arrogantly. Jin Guangri's every word provoked Kai Yidao's bottom line. He couldn't stand it anymore. Who would have thought that even so, Jin Guangri's attitude towards many police officers was still unwavering. Instead, Kai Yidao was reported by reporters for his actions of beating people. The next day, the superiors saw the news report that Kai Yidao was dismissed because of his actions. The police officer told Kai Yidao to behave himself, but Kai Yidao left and turned to the office to vent his emotions. He was helplessly venting, but he also clearly understood that until now, the only person he can trust is only Lao Jin. So he went to Lao Jin again, and he also learned another news about the Crown Prince. It turned out that Jin Guangri had briefly stayed in Hong Kong, and he used the same method there to kill a Korean and sold the video of the abuse to the dark website. Therefore, Lao Jin told Kai Yidao that as long as he could find this video, it would mean that he had found the evidence to restrain Jin Guangri. Hearing this, Kai Yidao rekindled his hope. But what he didn't expect was that Jin Guangri made another move, and even pointed the knife at the woman next to the procurator. Looking at the woman's long beard, Jin Guangri suddenly became interested. Until the procurator received the news and arrived here, he found that the woman was already dying. Jin Guangri was so perverted that he attacked his people. The procurator was completely enraged, so he disregarded Jin Guangri's situation and stepped on him directly, viciously threatening him. Jin Guangri was no longer afraid and moved out of his American backstage. That's why Americans like it, right? In the end, there was no choice, and the procurator had no choice but to choose to leave. At the same time, Kai Yidao also started investigating the Hong Kong incident. As a result, he did not expect to find useful clues. After grasping the solid evidence, Kai Yidao immediately found Jin Guangri. Hey, you had a good look at the screen. Can I cast you? It's perfect for a psycho. Then he played the video of Jin Guangri killing a woman publicly. Looking at the bloody scene in front of him, everyone on the scene felt a cold in the back. Jin Guangri also had no way out. Kai Yidao let Jin Yuan catch Jin Guangri, and then he revealed to the public that he had been hiding from the procuratorate for many years. Oh, that's right. Hey, Guangyera, come to think of it, I just realized why did you put weird things on the victims? Guangyera, you're not going to die, are you? Jin Guangri's last sense of dignity was torn apart. Jin Guangri was angry. He wanted to teach Kai Yidao a lesson, but he was beaten by the other party. Kai Yidao kept hitting Jin Guangri, insulting him, and then took him back to the police station in front of everyone. Kai Yidao thought the case was finally over. However, when the police car was on the way, Kai Yidao received a call from the police chief again, and the other party clearly pointed out that Jin Guangri had to be released. Otherwise, not only him, but all the police officers would be forced to stop. Kai Yidao didn't expect Jin Guangri to have such a great power behind him. He took a look at Jin Guangri sitting in the back, and he still smiled at himself with a gloomy face. Kai Yidao knew that the other party was full of tricks, and even if he didn't care about himself, he had to consider his subordinates. In the end, there was no way. Kai Yidao had to send Jin Guangri to the police chief again. Who would have expected that in the conversation between the two of them? Jin Guangri unbuttoned his handcuffs, picked up a pistol, and then in the next second, Kai Yidao's blood was seen all over the police chief's clothes, and it completely angered the police chief. So he ignored the persuasion of the Americans and chased him by foot. Who would have thought that on the way, Jin Guangri's car had an accident? Jin Guangri then walked out of the car. Looking at the familiar figure, Jin Guangri looked extremely panicked. He wanted to break through the window and escape, but he was hit by Jin Guangri and fainted. Jin Guangri dragged Jin Guangri to his car and then sent him on a wheelbarrow. The person who came to pick him up was responsible for sending him back to China. Jin Guangri only saw Jin Guangri after he was handcuffed. On the wheelbarrow, Jin Guangri threw the picture of the victim into the sea and thought they were spirits in heaven. However, in the next second, Jin Guangri appeared in a leather coat with a gun. He smiled lightly, and then another shot ended Jin Guangri's life. It turned out that the Crown Prince's power had never disappeared, and he also meant that he could return to the outside world. But in the end, justice will not leave. Many years later, in Hong Kong, The police chief returned alone and came to a community. After decisively shooting several guards, the police chief rushed into the gate and solved everyone in the room at the fastest speed. The terrible demon Jin Guangri thought the police chief was coming to save himself, but the police chief sat in front of him coldly and pointed a gun at Jin Guangri. No matter how Jin Guangri threatened and begged for mercy, the police chief did nothing. Then he put the pistol in Jin Guangri's mouth. Perhaps for the current police chief, he has lost the so-called superior protection, but he stayed on the front line at the last moment and spoke up for those dead souls.